I used to think a mother couldn't be humiliated by her own child. Not like this. Not after everything. But I was wrong. The night my son celebrated 10 years of marriage, he invited me, dressed me up, smiled beside me for photos, and still found the moment to tell someone I was only there, out of pity. I remember the exact words, "She only came because she's broke. We had to invite her, otherwise she'd have nowhere to go." He said it behind a curtain, to someone I didn't know. He didn't know I was there. He didn't know I was close enough to hear the last syllable stick to my chest like a dart. I didn't cry, not then. Let me take you back, just a little. My name is Grace Moreland. I'm 62 years old, a widow. I used to be a writer, nothing famous. Short stories, novellas, some work-for-hire romance fiction that paid well in the 90s. I had a good little career, not flashy, but enough to raise my son. Ethan, God, I loved that boy more than air. He was bright, intense, quick to learn. When his father died suddenly in a train accident, Ethan was 11, and everything fell on me. I wrote at night. Waitressed during the day, sold my grandmother's pearls to cover one semester at NYU. I didn't ask for help. I didn't complain. Because I believed, like any mother, that sacrifice was part of love. I still do. But what no one tells you is that children don't always grow up to understand that love. The night of the party, I wore my best dress. It was dark green, velvet trimmed, the same one I'd worn when Ethan graduated law school. Still fit. Still carried the scent of old perfume and newer loneliness. I spent the afternoon polishing a small wooden box, the last thing his grandfather ever gave me. Inside it, a wartime journal. Ethan's great-grandfather had fought in the Pacific. The journal was never published. I kept it hidden, waiting for the right moment. I thought, maybe at the party, I'd hand it to him. A piece of his legacy, a gift that wasn't about price tags or bank accounts. I arrived early, too early, it seems. The venue was beautiful, one of those renovated country clubs with chandeliers and fake gold trimmings. Guests were still arriving, and I decided to stay near the side, letting the young people get their drinks and laugh their loud, fast laughs. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, I swear to you, I didn't. But the curtain to the back hallway was cracked, and I heard his voice. "Ethan, my son, my boy. She only came because she's broke. We had to invite her, she'd guilt us for a year otherwise." Another voice laughed, a woman's. Maybe his wife Olivia, maybe a friend. It didn't matter. That single sentence did something to me. I didn't freeze. I didn't gasp. I didn't stumble into the room and confront him like in those TV dramas. No. I stood there, invisible. Just a woman with a gift in her hand and a heart in her throat. I stepped away slowly, walked through the crowd with practiced grace. Some people waved, some nodded politely, the way you nod at someone you think is past their prime. When Ethan saw me, he came forward with the most polished smile I'd seen on him in years. "Mom," he said, "you made it." I nodded. I didn't hug him. He didn't notice. I sat through the speeches, the toasts, the tearful vows being renewed. Everyone clapped when Olivia showed off her new ring. Someone joked about old people and diamonds, and I laughed too quietly. Into my napkin. I was handed a glass of champagne. I didn't drink it. Not because I was upset, but because I was listening. Watching. Ethan didn't introduce me once. Not to the investors, not to the in-laws, not to the woman who kept calling Olivia the real backbone of this family. I might as well have been a coat rack. When it was time to leave, Ethan walked me to the curb. He handed me a thick white envelope. "Just a little help, Mom," he said. "So you're okay this month?" I smiled, took the envelope, didn't say a word. When I got home, I opened it, $500, in crisp hundreds, tucked between a card that said, "Love you always." I stared at that money for a long time, and then I picked up the journal, still wrapped in the ribbon, still untouched. I slid it back into its wooden box, locked the box, and placed it on the highest shelf in my study. Something had shifted in me that night. Not rage, not sadness, just clarity, a kind of stillness. It's funny how the people who made you, they can also unmake you with a single sentence. "She only came because she's broke." No, Ethan, I didn't come because I was broke. I came because I loved you, because I raised you, because even now I still believed there was something left to hold on to between us. But I heard you, and now I know better. You didn't invite your mother. You invited your guilt. And I showed up. That was your last chance. I didn't sleep that night, but I wasn't restless. I sat in my armchair, wrapped in the old blue shawl my husband once brought back from Italy. It still smelled faintly of lavender and history. I watched the night pass like pages turning in slow motion. Sometimes, silence is not the absence of pain, it's the evidence of too much of it. The next morning, I made myself a cup of coffee, 2 sugars, just how I liked it. I didn't open the envelope again. Didn't reread the card that said, "Love you always." What do you call words that mean nothing? Lies, perhaps? Or worse, decoration? I looked around my house. It's small, cluttered, maybe, but it's mine. The kitchen sink leaks. The floor creaks in the hallway. But every corner whispers my name. Every shadow remembers my stories. I raised Ethan here. He took his first steps right there by the window. I have a photograph of him in that exact spot, giggling at his reflection. He used to call that window his mirror to the sky. He was poetic once, before law school, before success. I didn't call him that day, didn't text, didn't ask if they got home safe. He didn't call me either. Maybe that's the part that hurts the most. Not what he said, but how natural it seemed for him to walk away from me without a glance back. A few days later, I went to the pharmacy downtown. On my way in, I heard someone calling my name, Grace. Oh my God, it's been years. It was Marla, the neighbor from 2 doors down, back when Ethan was still in grade school. She pulled me into a hug before I could even pretend to be fine. I saw the pictures from Ethan's party. "You look so elegant, you must be so proud of him. A real power couple." Huh, I smiled. That's the thing about being a woman. You get very good at smiling through disappointment. You learn to curve your mouth while your heart stays flat. "I am proud," I said, because it was the truth. Pride isn't the same as love, and love isn't the same as loyalty. I'm allowed to feel one, even when the other fades. That night, I pulled out a box from the back of my closet. It was heavy. Inside were folders, contracts, and a small red leather notebook. Everything from the past 20 years of investments. Most people don't know this, but romance novels in the 90s paid very well if you were prolific. And I was. I wrote under 6 different pen names. I published 34 books. Then I invested. I wasn't loud about it. I never wore designer shoes or drove a fancy car. I let Ethan believe I was struggling, because I wanted him to focus on building his life, not expecting mine to rescue his. But I wasn't poor. I wasn't even close. At the bottom of that box was a document Ethan had never seen, my original will, signed 10 years ago. Beneficiary Ethan Moreland. Full estate. All accounts. All assets. I ran my fingers across his name, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not regret, just the steady click of clarity, like a lock turning from the inside. The next morning, I made an appointment with my lawyer. Her name is Clara Hensley, sharp as a whip, quiet as a cat. She didn't ask many questions. "I'd like to revise my will," I said. Her eyes flickered with curiosity. "To exclude your current heir," she asked gently. I nodded. Yes, understood. She handed me a clean sheet. We began again. Over the next few weeks, I stayed quiet. No confrontation, no drama. I didn't call Ethan, didn't send him the box with the journal, didn't respond to the automated birthday text from Olivia that said, "Hope you're well." People assume silence is weakness, but silence is a blade. The quieter I became, the sharper I got. One afternoon, I went to the library, the same one where I used to take Ethan for story time. The librarian, Charlotte, still remembered us. "You know," she said, "we've started a new mentorship program for teen writers. You'd be perfect." I laughed. Me, I'm past my prime. But she looked me in the eyes and said, "Your prime is whenever you decide to rise again." Something stirred inside me. I spent the next week drafting the framework for a new fund, the Grace Moreland Literary Foundation. Its mission to provide scholarships, mentorship, and publishing opportunities for underprivileged teen writers, especially those whose families never understood their passion. It wasn't revenge, it was redirection. Late one night, I stood in my garden. Moonlight made the flowers look like ghosts. I whispered to the air I gave him my life. He offered me pity. So now, I give my life to those who need it, not those who expect it. I know Ethan will be shocked. He'll say I blindsided him. He'll call me bitter or cold. But you see, a mother is not cold for protecting the pieces of herself. She is not cruel for refusing to let her legacy become a receipt. I used to think that love meant always giving. Now I know love also means knowing when to stop. I used to believe that love was a one-way street. You give, and eventually, something comes back. But sometimes, all that comes back is silence. Or worse, pity, wrapped in a smile. The morning I walked into Clara Hensley's office with my red leather notebook and a locked metal case, it wasn't out of rage. It was something colder, sharper, more final. It was resignation, dressed in velvet. Clara greeted me with a polite smile and a fresh stack of papers. "I've drawn up the amendments you requested," she said. "But if there are additional changes, there are," I replied, placing the case on her desk. The lock clicked open like punctuation. Inside, bank statements, investment portfolios, copyright certificates, and one very old war journal. She raised her eyebrows. "Just a little." "You weren't exaggerating," she murmured. "No," I said softly. I just stopped explaining myself. What people didn't know, what Ethan never cared to ask, was that while he built a career in law and corporate acquisitions, I'd been quietly building too. My books, they sold. In the U.S., in Europe, in Asia. Some were translated into 9 languages. 2 were adapted into streaming series no one knew I'd ghost-written. I never flashed money, never bragged, never played the game of luxury. But I watched my accounts grow while everyone assumed I was fading. They saw the gray hair, the modest home, the lack of designer bags, and they assumed I had nothing. But invisibility is power if you learn how to hold it. Clara and I worked for hours that day. We rewrote every clause of my will, removed Ethan as beneficiary, redirected all funds into the newly founded Grace Moreland Literary Trust. Clara's pen moved smoothly across the paper. "There's one more thing," I said. She looked up. "I want to include a letter, to be opened at the reading of the will. Only then." She handed me an envelope. I took a breath, and I began to write. "To my son, Ethan. You were not erased, you were removed. There's a difference. Erasure happens without choice. Removal happens when choice is given, and wasted. You were given my years, my body, my dreams, my silence, my sacrifice. And when the world celebrated your success, I stood back and clapped the loudest. But you chose pity over pride, distance over dignity, and money over memory. So now I choose too. I choose to leave my name, my words, and my legacy in the hands of those who will carry it with reverence, not obligation. This is not revenge, this is realignment. May you one day understand the difference." I sealed the letter. My hands did not shake. Later that week, I donated the war journal to the Veterans History Project. They scanned it, preserved it, and promised to display it in a small exhibit with my father-in-law's name etched in bronze. I smiled. That journal didn't belong to Ethan anymore. It never really did. Legacy is earned, not inherited. A week passed, then 2. Ethan didn't call. I wasn't surprised. Maybe he assumed I was sulking. Maybe he believed his envelope of pity money had worked its magic. Maybe he thought mothers don't change. But I had changed. Not out of bitterness, but clarity. One evening, I visited the literary center Charlotte had told me about. There were rows of young writers fidgeting, wide-eyed, hopeful. I gave a short talk, read from one of my old novellas. When I finished, a girl no older than 17 raised her hand. "How do you write something when no one around you believes you're worth anything?" The room went silent. I looked at her, really looked. She had Ethan's eyes, but not his shield. I walked down the aisle, placed a hand on her shoulder, and said, "You write anyway, because the people who don't see your worth, they're the same ones who'll try to own your success one day. Write now, and let the truth outlive them." She cried, and I knew right then she would inherit me, not through blood, but through fire. That night, I revised my will one last time, adding a clause. The trust shall offer a named fellowship each year to one writer under 21 whose family did not support their artistic path. I named it the Letter She Wrote Anyway Fellowship. It wasn't just about Ethan anymore. It was about severing the idea that legacy must follow bloodlines. I sat in my kitchen with a cup of peppermint tea. Rain tapped gently on the windows. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. Not powerful, not righteous, just whole. My life was no longer a trail behind me. It was a fire I was still feeding. There's a kind of peace that comes from letting go without ceremony. No shouting, no letters shoved under doors, no final warnings, just a signature, a sealed envelope, and the unwavering knowledge that when the time comes, you will not be remembered for who you gave to, but for how much you kept from those who didn't deserve it. They say death comes quietly. In my case, they weren't wrong. A Thursday morning, a cold floor, a final breath I didn't even feel slip out of me. I was gone before the kettle whistled. I won't describe the end. That part belongs to silence. But I will tell you this. When I left, I wasn't scared. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even alone. I had lived a full circle, raised a boy, buried a husband, wrote stories into the dark and watched them light up lives I'd never meet. But most of all, I had written my ending, exactly the way I wanted. The lawyer's office smelled like polished wood and legal tension. Ethan arrived in a pressed navy suit, Olivia in something beige and expensive. They looked tired, not from grief, but from anticipation. I wasn't there. But I can imagine it clearly. The rustle of papers, the impatient fingers drumming the table, the glances exchanged like silent texts. Clara Hensley sat across from them with perfect posture. She didn't greet them with sympathy. She greeted them with precision. We are gathered here today to read the last will and testament of Grace Morland. She began. Her voice was calm, her tone unapologetically surgical. She opened the envelope, and then she started reading. To all who hear these words, let it be known that this document reflects my clear and unpressured intent. I, Grace Evelyn Morland, leave behind not just money or material, but meaning, my estate, including savings, intellectual property, investments, and personal artifacts, is to be transferred entirely to the Grace Morland Literary Trust. The room went still. Clara continued. No individual member of my family shall inherit these assets directly. This includes, but is not limited to, my son, Ethan Morland, and his immediate household. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like a bomb with no explosion, just fallout. Clara slid a sealed envelope across the table. This is for Ethan. As per her instruction, it is to be opened now, not before, not after. Ethan took it. His hands trembled, just a little, not from fear, from insult. He opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, the one I had written weeks before, under the yellow lamplight, with every word carved like stone. Ethan, if you are reading this, it means I've kept my word. I told you nothing, I gave you silence, and now I leave you truth. I heard what you said that night. Every word. I was not standing far away. I was behind the curtain. And while you drank champagne and spoke of me like a burden, I held in my hands the gift I had brought you. A war journal, a legacy, something you were never curious enough to ask about. You chose pity over pride, charity over character. You offered me money like a beggar at your gate. So now, I choose too. I choose to give everything I built, not to the blood that dismissed me, but to the voices that will one day remember mine. He didn't finish reading the letter. He folded it, but not neatly. He didn't cry, and that, I suppose, was the final proof that he had long ago lost the ability to grieve anything that couldn't be bought back. Olivia asked, coldly. Is this even legal? Clara didn't flinch. She revised everything, notarized, witnessed, digitally secured. Why would she do this? Ethan asked, his voice cracking for the first time. But it wasn't grief. It was disbelief. How dare the story not end the way he expected? Clara tilted her head. She left one more line, a postscript. She opened the final page. Read aloud to my son. You invited me to your celebration with pity. So I have left you with what you gave me. Nothing. He stood, stormed out, didn't even take the envelope with him. Olivia followed. She didn't touch him as they left. There was no hand on his arm, no whispered reassurance, just the sharp click of heels and a closing door. Later that week, my will was executed. My copyrights were transferred to the trust. My home sold. The profits used to open the Moreland Youth Writers Center. The war journal already in the hands of historians, its contents digitized, its words speaking louder now than they ever had before. Ethan tried to contest the will. Of course he did. But Clara was ready. So was I. Every document, every timestamp, every witness, flawless. It took just 3 weeks for the court to dismiss his claim. And in that final hearing, when the judge asked if Ethan had anything further to say, he looked around the courtroom, at the empty space where his mother used to sit, and said nothing, because now he understood the weight of silence. They say blood is thicker than water, but legacy is written in ink and action, and my son's name was no longer in the story. It's strange, writing an ending to your own story. Stranger still when you know you won't be there to see how it lands, but that's the gift of letting go. You stop writing for applause, and you start writing for the ones who will whisper your name, not because they inherited your things, but because they understood your silence. After the will was read, after the papers were filed, after the fight Ethan tried to start was quietly extinguished in court, the world went on, as it always does. But in a few corners, something new began to grow. The Grace Moreland Literary Trust opened its first scholarship application within 60 days of my death. It didn't make headlines. There were no gala launches, no gold-plated sponsors, just an online form, a quiet inbox, and a single requirement. Tell us why you kept writing, even when no one cared. We received over 400 essays in the first week, raw, unfiltered, from trailer parks, foster homes, halfway houses, from girls who hid notebooks under pillows, from boys who wrote by flashlight because their stepfather said men don't journal. One applicant wrote, "I write because it's the only time I get to be the main character in my life." She was 17. I would have liked her. The trust funded 12 fellows that first year, not just tuition. We gave them mentors, editing support, a path forward, and most of all, a message: you are not invisible. You are not broken. You are not your family's failure to understand you. I watched it all from wherever I am now. Not heaven, not exactly, well, but somewhere just past noise, a place full of breath and memory. I don't haunt, I don't hover, but sometimes, when one of those kids sits down to write when the page lights up under their fingers, I feel something spark in the dark. That's legacy. Not buildings, not bank accounts, but light passed quietly, deliberately, to hands that were never expected to carry it. Ethan, he lives. Of course he does. Still in the same house, still driving the same black Range Rover, still taking meetings, still shaking hands with men who smile too wide and mean too little. But something changed. People don't ask about his mother anymore. The clients who once praised his family values don't bring them up. At fundraisers, he stands with a glass in his hand, but no story behind his eyes. Because now, everyone knows he wasn't in the will. One afternoon, 2 years later, he visited the Moreland Youth Center. No one recognized him. He stood outside the building I had once dreamed into existence, watched children scribbling in spiral-bound notebooks, listened as a girl recited her poem through a trembling voice. He didn't go in. He didn't sign the guest book. He just stood there. And maybe, for a moment, he remembered the war journal, still sealed in ribbon, still unopened, still waiting on a kind of curiosity he never found. Later that week, he made a phone call. Not to Clara, not to a court, to Charlotte, the head of the center. He offered a donation, a large one. She declined. We don't take donations from names, only from hearts. He didn't argue, didn't send a check, didn't try to redeem, and I think that was the first time he truly understood what I had done. I hadn't just disinherited him. I had written him out, because he had already erased me long before. Years will pass. His children might ask about me one day. He'll have to decide whether to lie, or tell them what it cost to treat a mother like an inconvenience. Maybe he'll show them photos. Maybe he won't. But in the corners of bookshops, in scholarship plaques, in lines of poetry spoken at graduation ceremonies, my name will still ring, not as a donor, not as a martyr, not even as a mother, but as a woman who gave everything and then chose to give it elsewhere. The final lesson, it's not about punishment, it never was. It's about reclaiming weight, about refusing to pour gold into a well that never once offered water in return. I do not hate my son, but I do not carry him anymore. He lives in a world I no longer inhabit, a world where money buys appearances, but not memory, where legacy is assumed but not earned. I'm not in that world now. I'm in this one, a quiet, steady one, where stories breathe again, where young hands write things I never dared say aloud, where love is returned, even when it's given anonymously, where my name still means something.